This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
A common sense recap of the day's biggest stories. It's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby. Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC.
And of course, today, a huge hearing took place on Capitol Hill, you guys, where they talked about something that the Biden-Harris administration never spoke about. The 300,000 missing kids, the migrant kids that came across the border, and who knows, sadly, where they are. And joining us now to talk about this and also the resistance building up against Trump's plans to do deportation, Ron Vitiello, former border chief, former acting ICE director. Ron, let's first start with these missing kids. You know what? One of the things that was stunning to me today, there was they cited a case, a whistleblower talked about this one case of a sponsor, a quote sponsor, who was like a foster parent. And that person sponsored 2,500 kids. That should have been alarm bells from day one. Think about how frightening and what's happening to those kids right now.
Yeah, these poor children, they 300,000+ of them were encountered at the border, let go in the United States, and our own government has no idea where they are at. But we do know that they've been trafficked in the labor scenario. We know they're trafficked as human beings. They talked in the hearing about organ harvesting in Mexico and other places. And so these kids, in theory, left their homes to have a better life in the United States. They got in this pipeline and they were abused in the worst ways possible. And the root problem here is the Biden administration and Vice President Harris, our so-called border czar, kicked open all of the border. They destroyed the control levels that they inherited at the border, putting everyone in danger in the United States, and in putting these people that are in the pipeline at great risk from corrupt governments and cartels that do nothing but trade on the misery of human beings to make money. And so this hearing laid bare, there's no justification for what the Biden-Harris administration did. When you start to talk about the abuse that these kids have gone through and the lack of control at our border that's led to the worst things possible. And not only did they tear down all the policies that were working, there was a system in place to do rapid DNA testing to children who came across the border without their parents. The Biden administration ended that program, thereby not giving agents on the ground the ability to identify whether if they were traveling with somebody or someone who they will eventually get placed with in the United States was in fact their relatives. And so this administration has no credibility as it relates to any of the domestic operations as it relates to border security and national security. And we're all going to pay the price. We are paying the price right now. We've watched all week the Laken Riley case where details have come out about this person who was from Venezuela who came and did terrible things to her.
Yeah, a monster who had prior offenses also in Queens and a prior offense in Georgia. And then he obviously crossed the border illegally. And his brother has ties to the Venezuelan gang, Ron.
Yes. And it turns out that the Biden administration gave him an airplane ride to Atlanta. We
did. Taxpayers did, right?
That's right. And so, I'm very enthusiastic about the new administration coming in. We know that Donald J. Trump is an advocate for a secure border and safe streets in the United States. We have a tough but smart immigration policy that will be enacted both in the interior and at the immediate border. And so I'm looking forward, and I know that the men and women of the Border Patrol, the frontline teams at ICE, et cetera, are very happy that help is on the way.
Thank goodness. Governor Pataki.
Yeah, Ron, thank you for all you did when you were in the position. But I believe right on day one, President Trump's going to sign executive orders reversing a lot of what the Biden-Harris administration did to destroy any effective control at the border. But how long will it take to put back in place the systems you had when it was being run correctly? The detention centers, as you mentioned, the DNA testing, all of this has been dismantled. as a practical matter, assuming we start on day one, how long is it going to take to put in place the systems that you actually had?
Yeah, literally days, right? We have to have an agreement with Mexico for the migrant protection protocols. If they don't want to sign that agreement right away, if they don't want to reinstitute the migrant protection protocols, the safe third country agreements that we had with them and the Northern Triangle, then we need to leverage that. It might take longer to leverage it. It might take longer to incentivize them with a trade tariff or something like that. But once you establish that there's going to be a consequence for crossing the border illegally, then people will stop coming. The problem gets immediately smaller. It gives the front line the opportunity to find people who are being trafficked, to seize more fentanyl and other drugs that are coming across the country, across the border, and be able to target people who are smugglers. And so you've got to reduce the volume. You can do that fairly quickly as long as the people in the pipeline and the smugglers understand that there's going to be a consequence for coming into the United States illegally. And because what's happening now is 85% of everybody that shows up on our border and our shores gets released in the United States. You end that incentives and you start to see immediate effect in the tactical sense. Now, strategically, this agreement with Mexico, probably some leverage with Venezuela and China and other countries to have a repatriation and a removal plan. But it starts immediately. Within hours, you will see a difference on the border.
Let's pray. Former Border Chief Ron Vitiello, Judge Weinberg.
Ron, you just hit it. The other aspect of the problem is you have, 10, 15, 20 million people who are here illegally. How do you get them out? How do you set up a system for removal that can work?
So, Judge, as we speak today, there are men and women at ICE that do this work. The fugitive operations teams, there's about 150 across the country. You need to scale up that work. So they need to find the people who are the worst of the worst, criminal aliens, people who have convictions, people who have already been ordered by a judge. Open records say that 1.5 million people in the United States have already had their due process in immigration court. So you target the worst of the worst within that subset of 1.5 million on the non-detained docket. And then you start to scale it up. You scale it up first, probably using state and local and county sheriff's offices, increase the number of 287G agreements across the country. You start with the state and locals. You leverage the state and locals that don't want to help us. And then they're talking today about declaring an emergency and using military assets. And I think that would be a very valuable assistance. Get the front line on the front line and let the logistics experts in our military help us design detention centers, help us design a transportation program and a repatriation program that starts to bring people into custody and put them on a path for removal.
Yeah, absolutely. And already these mayors and governors from the blue cities, they're like, nobody's leaving, even the criminals. It's going to be an interesting tug of war, that's for sure. Ron Vitiello, thank you very much. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
It's good to be with you. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you for your great service and for protecting the country. Thank you so much.